The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
Welcome from the General Assembly and the City of Richmond. I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports and Comcast. And a very warm welcome to Delegate Mark Cole. Good to see you, sir.
Well, thank you for having me.
I think you're chair of the Privileges and Elections Committee, the oldest standing committee in the House of Delegates.
That's correct.
And the Speaker of the House, Bill Howell. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you again, Woody. Thank you.
Well, it looks like in economic terms, the Commonwealth is doing fairly well compared to the rest of the nation. I think our unemployment rate is now 5.6%.
Mm-hmm. You're right. Compared to the rest of the nation, we're doing well, but compared to historical standards, it's still been a very weak recovery. And the economy is still very fragile, and that's one thing that we've been very concerned about during this legislative session. We don't want to get in the way of the economy recovering, and we want to do all that we can to help create more jobs and do more to make Virginia an even better place to work.
And of course, I assume jobs in the economy are still critical issues for your constituency and your legislative district?
They certainly are. They certainly are. Both Mark and I represent, I guess, what I'll call southern northern Virginia, and we're right on the edge of it. But an awful lot of our constituents travel to northern Virginia, work for defense-related businesses, and there's a lot of concern and a lot of job displacement already. And if the sequester pops in like they talk it might, that's going to be quite an impact on the Virginia economy.
And of course, Delegate Cole, that sequester not only affects people who are employed directly by the federal government, but contractors and our military installations around the Commonwealth.
That's right, and that's one thing we're very concerned about. It's a shame that Washington can't get their act together and start trying to bring the deficit down in an orderly fashion instead of threatening across-the-board cuts with something like sequestration. We're trying to do what we can here in the capital, Virginia capital, to prepare for it. Last year, the governor started a fund to try to set aside some money to minimize potential impacts, because Virginia is very dependent on federal contractors, federal employees, and things like that. Both in Northern Virginia and down in the Hampton Roads area, where you have a huge military presence. So we're certainly doing what we can to try to prepare for the worst, but we're also hoping for the best and doing what we can to make sure that Virginia maintains its rating as one of the best places to do business.
How are the counties and local governments doing? For example, Spotsylvania and Fredericksburg.
Well, they're doing what they can to keep their budgets in line. They kind of indirectly depend on the federal government, but mostly they get their funding from state and then local taxes. But certainly, I think everybody's keeping an eye on what's going on in Washington.
And what about Stafford County? Is it doing fairly well?
Well, it is doing fairly well. It is, as Mark said, the people there are very concerned also about this fragile economy that we're in. Stafford's done a great job of cutting back in their spending. We've lowered our taxes in Stafford County for the last 3 years, our real estate taxes. We've had surpluses. They're being considered for an upgrade in their bond rating. So Stafford's doing a good job, but it's not easy.
Well, we're a little bit halfway through the 2013 45-day session, and transportation has been a big issue. Congratulations on getting a bill passed on transportation.
Well, it's just the first step, and we'll see what happens. It's over in the Senate now, and it was a proposal. The governor made some I think, some pretty bold suggestions on how we ought to address our transportation infrastructure funding problem. We've been talking about it now for 26 years I've been in the House, and we're as close to doing something significant as we've been in my 26 years. And I'm certainly hopeful that our bill, which now is in the Senate, will receive. I'm sure they're going to amend it, make some changes to it, but I hope they just don't kill it like they did all the transportation bills that were introduced within the Senate. And what will happen is they'll make some changes, probably some significant changes, and just like the budget, the bill will go to a conference, and the conferees hopefully will be able to come up with a compromise that will be acceptable to a majority of the members in both bodies.
Now, were there many changes to the proposal that you introduced on behalf of the governor?
We made some changes, and we made some commitments to make further changes once it gets into conference. But the basic concept is still there. I don't know how long it'll survive, but the basic concept of eliminating the gasoline tax, the 17.5 cents per gallon that Virginia levies now, and replacing that with an increase in the sales tax of 0.8%. It's revenue neutral in the first year. The advantage to doing that, I think, and the governor believes, is that the gasoline tax has become sort of an antiquated tax as cars get better and better gas mileage, as they turn to alternate fuel vehicles. The Commonwealth, by executive order, is converting all of their gasoline cars to natural gas. And those types of things are going to go on throughout the Commonwealth. As the gas tax becomes less and less reliable. Last year we received $30 million less in gasoline tax proceeds than the year before, and that's not a huge amount in the big scheme of things, but it's on a definite trajectory going downhill, and the sales tax will grow more. So I think it's good to substitute the sales tax for the gasoline tax. Now, we'll compromise. A lot of people don't share that feeling, but we'll see how it goes. Some of the arguments against using sales tax include that it's a general fund tax, and we're taking money from education and health and human services. Actually, we're not, because it'd be a new tax, and we wouldn't be taking money from that. And also, I really believe that transportation is a core responsibility of state government, just like K-12 education or just like health and human services, and needs to be funded from the general fund as well.
Now, everybody agrees there's a problem in terms of transportation funding. We've been kind of working around the edges over the past several years. What are some of the greatest transportation needs in your district?
Well, it's I-95 is the big bottleneck. So many people, as the speaker said, live in the Fredericksburg area, but then they commute to Northern Virginia and D.C. for their jobs, and I-95 has just become, hit its capacity. I mean, there's almost never a good time to try to drive on 95 between Spotsylvania and D.C. We are working on making improvements there. The hot lanes proposal is proceeding, and that will expand the capacity of the current hot lanes, or HOV lanes, and then move it farther south. The initial phase of it is to extend it down to Garrisonville, and eventually all the way down to Spotsylvania.
I understand that some criticism has been leveled at the governor's proposal relating to reliance on the Congress to pass a law that would allow for the tax of internet retail sales online. I understand that there's more encouragement about Congress doing that. We do have the majority leader of the House from Virginia. We do have the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee from Virginia, and we've got 2 U.S. senators who are former governors who are very familiar with these issues. How do you see that?
Well, it's very difficult to predict anything that's going to happen in Washington right now. So while that is certainly a component of the governor's proposal to, if that authority to collect the sales tax on the internet and out-of-state mail order purchases comes through, that'll certainly be part of the mix. However, like I said, it's difficult to predict what's going to happen in Washington.
Now, I understand the diesel fuel tax, at least for trucks, will remain in the governor's proposal?
Yes, the diesel trucks, about 70% of the diesel fuel is allocated to out-of-state trucks that come in through Virginia, and also the trucks do the most wear and tear on the roads. And so, in order to recognize the fact that so much of the diesel tax comes from out-of-state trucks, we've left the diesel tax in place. What we're doing through the bill is providing, just like farm vehicles can get a rebate for diesel tax that they buy, diesel fuel that they buy, the tax on that. We're going to do the same with vehicles used for private use, diesel cars, and so those people will be kept whole.
Now, heretofore, the General Assembly has been able to use the state's borrowing authority to help with transportation needs. I think it was in 2011 you accelerated that process, and because interest rates were so low, the state was able to leverage about $4 billion into new construction.
Yes, that's been a big help, and really what the governor's proposal this year does is allow for more money for maintenance and construction. And you can't use borrowed funds for that. This is an annual year-over-year thing. But the acceleration of the bonds that we had authorized previously to take advantage of the historically low interest rates, as well as the fact that there were a lot of construction companies looking for work, and we were able to, as you say, to leverage that money into probably about $6 billion worth of projects. Also through using public-private partnerships and using the state portion of that partnership, we were able to leverage that through the private sector as well. Mark talked about the hot lanes coming down from 495. Those express lanes are a public-private partnership, and we couldn't do it without the private sector participation.
And I understand there was some pushback regarding continued tolling of roads south of Fredericksburg.
Yeah, because one of the governor's proposals was to start tolling some of the interstates like I-95, down near the North Carolina border, in order to generate funds for maintenance and possible expansion of I-95 in certain areas. That proved to be unpopular with several members, and so as part of the compromise to get the transportation package pushed through, the governor said, hey, if you pass the package, we'll include an amendment on there that says, we won't do the tolling on 95.
What's been very popular, however, has been the governor's initiatives on education, K through 12. Talk to us a little bit about that.
That's right. The governor is kind of trying to reform education, and how we evaluate and review teachers and treat their contracts. His package on that is moving forward. Also, there's another companion bill regarding charter schools for districts that have failing schools and how to handle those. Right now, we've had a charter school law on the books for years, but currently only 4 charter schools are operating in the state, and we certainly have many more schools that are having difficulty in failing that may be able to make use of the charter schools. And also the one that's kind of controversial is the grading of schools, kind of developing an A through F school to grade how schools are doing, not just with their accrediting tests and things like that, but also how they're making progress and things.
Now, those charter school applications are now dealt with at the local level. Now, as I understand it, the resolution would give that authority to the State Board of Education.
Well, in certain circumstances. Right now, yeah, any charter schools are a local option. However, the governor's proposal is in cases where a school has been failing, and for not just 1 year or 2 years, but for an extended period, then the state could step in and kind of take control of the situation and set up either new leadership at the school, or perhaps even go the charter school route.
And Mr. Speaker, raises for teachers is also part of the governor's package, but I think it may have been expanded to other personnel as well.
Yes, it has. Within the House budget, I know we expanded it. It was a 2% raise that the governor proposed, and we've expanded that to support personnel as well.
And then Teach for America. The governor wants to bring that program to the Commonwealth to attract new, bright, young
right.
teachers.
That's been a very successful program, and in other states, and we want to bring it to Virginia and utilize that tool as well.
Great. Another perennial in terms of K through 12 has to do with local control over the school calendar. And of course there are pros and cons depending upon whether there's tourism in your district or not, but what's the likelihood of that King's Dominion law going away?
Well, and Mark and I probably voted differently on this for different reasons, but I really think that if there's anything that the local jurisdictions ought to be able to have a say in, it's when schools open and when they close. The so-called King's Dominion bill is really the post-Labor Day opening bill that's been in the law for some years now, is effectively going away on its own. As more and more counties apply for waivers, they get these waivers, and what's the figure, Mark? It's like 60 or 70% of the counties already can open when they want to. But the tourism proponents make a very good argument that it will have a significant impact on the economic benefits of tourism. And again, I'll come back to what we were talking about early on. We're in a tough economy right now. We need to do everything we can to encourage all parts. I can't say whether the bill passed the House. I'm not sure it'll pass the Senate or not. But.
And of course, even though Tim Tebow did not make the Super Bowl, he's made it back, at least in name, before the General Assembly again, a bill that would allow those children who are homeschooled to participate in athletics.
Yeah, and once again, we've passed this bill out before, and there's, I think, a little bit of a misconception with it. All it does is give local school boards the authority, if they so choose, to allow homeschoolers to try out for sports or participate in extracurricular activities. You know, the argument is that the homeschooling parents are paying taxes to support the schools just like everybody else. So, why shouldn't they be able to make use of those services if they need to?
Privileges and elections. I think there's been a lot going on there as you continue to chair that committee, one dealing with voter ID. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, last year we passed the first voter ID legislation in Virginia history, and it required voters to present ID before voting. It wasn't a photo ID bill, but it had a list of items that could be used as ID. And during last year's campaign, there was a video that leaked out of a congressional campaign staffer up in Northern Virginia who was discussing ways to cheat using some of these items, and some of the items on the list were utility bills, bank statements, and paychecks, those type of things. So those type of things probably never should have been included on the list to begin with, because they're very weak forms of ID. So the House has passed out legislation to remove things like that from the voter ID list.
And I think it's Delegate Danny Marshall has a bill dealing with the use of schools as polling places.
Yeah, that bill did not go forward. He was trying to prohibit the use of schools as polling places, but those are public facilities and they should be used for public purposes. Certainly elections qualify in that.
What about absentee voting? I know there's been some
we've had several bills to try to expand absentee voting. I'm not sure if we really need to, because we do have an extensive list of what qualifies for an absentee voting, and currently, if you're going to be out of town or think you're going to be out of town on business on election day, then certainly you can go ahead and submit an absentee ballot, or go into the registrar's office and vote early. Once you fill out an application.
Right. So I want to circle back for a moment to transportation in the sense that the Commonwealth, even though it's in the top three, lost its position as number one as being friendly to business, and I understand the sole reason was because of our transportation infrastructure.
Well, that was certainly an issue that did it, and I mean, everyone likes to be number one, but being number three, we've been in the top three for the past 10 years, and we are clearly a good place to do business. We continue to attract businesses from other states, as well as have people start and generate and create and expand businesses within Virginia. So, sure, it would be helpful that's one of the big reasons why we need to do something with funding transportation infrastructure. But Virginia remains a great place in which to do business.
And I know there's been a number of moves to alleviate some of the burdensome regulations that continue to exist, especially for those who want to become small business people. Our veterans returning from Iraq, Afghanistan, and from around the world. Talk to us about some of the initiatives there.
Well, last year we had a group of first-year delegates who are each small business people in their own way. One's a farmer, one's has a group of concessions, and another's an engineer, and another runs a home health care business. And these four guys got together and said, we need to form a small business caucus. Now, they don't call it that. I think they call it the Business Development Caucus. And it's got about 20 members now. And last year, one of the things they did, and I really take my hat off to these new members for being, aggressive like
I think most of them were freshmen that started that.
All were, yeah. And they went on the road last year, and they went all around the Commonwealth, and they would have public hearings, if you will, with the National Federation of Independent and the local chambers would help bring people there. And I attended one of them, and they start out with a question: if you had a magic wand, Mr. Small Business Person, what would you ask for in the way of either getting rid of or getting a new regulation or statute in Virginia? And they came up with a list of about 10 or 15 items that were consistent throughout all their meetings, and have introduced legislation to deal with those, and they've been relatively successful so far. So we sometimes overlook the fact that small business is really the backbone of business in Virginia and in all states, and people that have 2, 3, 10, 20 employees, 200 employees as a small business are really the economic engine that's driving Virginia.
Yeah, I believe one of their initiatives would allow electronic filing at the State Corporation Commission, for example.
Yeah, and there's a lot of common sense things that you could just that you could do to lessen the burden on small businesses, and we're always open to that. We need to do what we can to encourage entrepreneurs to go out and create new jobs, because it's the small businesses that create most of the new jobs. It's not the big established firms that create a lot of new jobs. It's the small startups that really drive new job creation, and that's what we need in this lukewarm economy. Is we need more entrepreneurs going out there doing what they can to start businesses and kind of jumpstart job creation.
Back to our friends up north, Interstate 95. As you know, the U.S. Supreme Court last year upheld the Affordable Care Act, but in doing so indicated that the states had a lot more flexibility in whether to accept Medicaid funding, especially expanding it, which is very expensive. What's happening in that arena?
Well, right now the governor has chosen not to set up state exchanges. There were two areas of, I guess, flexibility that states had regarding that. One is the setting up of healthcare exchanges, and the governor has decided that there's really no advantage or benefit for Virginia to set up her own state exchanges, so the federal government is going to have to do that for the Commonwealth. And then also one of the other components was the expansion of Medicaid. And that's kind of a controversial issue in that right now the federal government is offering money to pay for the expansion, but it's questionable as to whether or not that money will be available in the future. And so again, the governor has decided not to push Medicaid expansion, because it could end up being a budget buster in just a few years.
And those costs have risen over the years, some 1,600%.
Yeah, 1,600%. Yeah.
I also think one of your colleagues in the House has a bill that would allow the state, pending further discussions with the federal government, to accept funding for the first 3 years.
There may have been a bill like that. It didn't pass. There is budget language, I think, in both the Senate and the House budgets that will allow us to work with Health and Human Services in Washington to get some relaxation on their and some waivers on some different points of the Medicaid system. Medicaid is a broken system right now, and the thought of it consumes about 22% of our general fund budget, our portion of it. And the idea of putting the estimates been anywhere from 250,000 to 400,000 new people onto Medicaid with the lure of federal funding, which wouldn't cover all the cost in any event, because we still have to staff. How many more people are you going to have to hire to handle 300,000 more enrollees? Those things the state has to cover. It would cost the country, I would imagine, trillions of dollars over the next 10 years if every state elected to expand Medicaid. And they just don't have the money. They just don't have the money. They're running annually $1.2, $1.5 trillion deficits. The national deficit is well over $16 trillion now. And we just can't continue on that path.
Another hot issue, excuse the pun, is uranium. And apparently that has fallen short in the Senate. It's been before us for the last couple of years. There's an attempt to convince the governor to, by executive regulations, to put together a regulatory regime. Thinking forward, where do you think that issue will go, if anywhere?
Well, right now it's not going anywhere very fast. There has been a proposal to lift the ban on uranium mining that I believe has been in place since the early 80s, and it's still being studied and discussed, but however there's been no action to actually lift the ban. And even if the General Assembly were to lift the ban, that would not automatically mean uranium mining would proceed, because that would just mean that the Department of Mining could receive applications for uranium mining and consider them. Right now, they can't even do that. So it's a long way off, I think, from happening. And
I think the vast majority of the South Side members, including local government, were opposed to it because, in their eyes, the risk-benefit analysis just didn't hold true.
Yeah, unquestionably, the people that live near the proposed mine in Pittsylvania County were adamantly opposed to it, and a lot of there were some people in favor of it because it would have created a significant number of jobs in an area that's hard hit by unemployment, and it would have raised new tax revenue for those areas that need the money. But I think the vast majority of the people and local governments down there were concerned about it, as you say, the risk versus the reward.
So likely to be back next session, or you just can't tell?
I don't think you can tell. It's a tremendously valuable asset. They've estimated over $7 billion worth of value in that uranium that's unmined down there, and I think that in itself would be enough to make people keep coming back. But at some point, I think they'll probably go somewhere else.
Great. Well, thank you both for being here, Delegate Mark Cole and Speaker Bill Howell. We appreciate your public service.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans.